if they did microwaves and they cooked you? Like they just had two magnetrons.
We have microwave using weapons in today's world.
Really?
Yeah, they're outlawed by the Geneva Convention, but yeah, they're like the amount of stuff that we do.
They use microwaves?
Microwave, like it's not exactly
like magnetrons.
It's basically just I forget how it was like described, but it's this type of weapon where it fires out a flash of light, and then it either completely blinds anyone that looks at it, or like even sees the ground next to it, or it straight up cooks them. But it's outlawed by the Geneva Convention, so you can't use it.
And why not?
Because it's outlawed by the Geneva Convention.
Who follows that?
Everyone. And no one, I guess. Like, there's certain things you can do with the Geneva Convention and certain things you can't do. Like, there are certain laws
isn't the Geneva Convention pretty much to, like, make war, like, fair?
Fair. It's to make war, like, it's like, rules of war have been established since, like...
Why do we have rules of war?
Because here's what happens. It was made because... it was especially big in the 1800s and 1700s, because what would happen is...
they didn't even have anything back then.
They did.
What, were their, like, swords too long?
What happened was, I don't know what war was it, but they started doing this. They would take their musket balls, and they would purposely infect the musket balls. Like, they'd put them in, like, the carcasses of dead cattle and pull them back out. So when they fired the shots into enemy soldiers, back then, the odds of a bullet killing you were very small. I didn't do that much damage. But if it was infected, you would die for disease 100%. And because it's a horrible way to die, and it was seen as an unclean way to kill someone, they outlawed it. And the same thing goes for officers, because back then...
So they would stick the musket balls in, like, dead cattle?
Yes, and, like, something like that, to infect it.
So like, Billy from the 1800s is going over to a dead cow, and he's, like, going to cut into it. He's like, I'm going to put these musket balls in here. I'm going to come back and...
Someone somewhere started doing that, and they said, that's messed up. You can't do that. And they stopped doing it.
That's so crazy.
Because in Europe...
It's like, listen, we're in war, and we're trying to kill each other, but you can't kill me slowly.
You can only kill them in a certain way, because it has to be humane.
It's war.
What happens is, in the 1800s...
So, you can't infect somebody. But if you're riding by on a horse and you happen to just lop their head off,
yeah,
that's good.
Because that's different. Apparently, the Europeans created this stuff.
Like, what about the triangle bayonets?
The triangle bayonets?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Like they started making, like, at one point all the bayonets were just like knives basically strapped onto guns, and then they changed them to be triangle because it was a lot harder to stitch up the wound. Yeah. So that you'd just, like, bleed out.
Yeah,
that's not outlawed.
That's different because you don't. I don't know how it's determined, but I think it has to be, like, straight up. The weapon just kills you due to fighting. Like it's your metal versus theirs. But if you use disease to kill someone, there are certain types of warfare you can't engage in. Biological warfare is the biggest one. You cannot use biological warfare to kill humans, and the main reason is because it can backlash. So if the reason why we don't create diseases...
Who's making these rules, though?
I don't know. It's like mostly Europe. Europe's the main ones that do it.
Like if me and you were in war, are we supposed to sit down before the war and be like, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do my best to kill you, but I'm not going to do it this way.
Mm-hmm. See, America actually broke the rules of war. Like, our first war, we broke the rules of war.
That's what we do. We're Americans.
Because in the Revolutionary War... back then, killing officers was a big no-no. Like, you were not supposed to kill officers, but because everybody hated
your own officers.
No, enemy officers. Like, if there's two lines.
Really?
Yeah, there's like a line here and a line here, and there's an officer commanding both lines. And if you shoot the officer, what happens is that his men no longer have orders, and they just go into a blind charge, or they rout because they don't have anyone commanding them.
So are they stupid? They're just like a. They're just like, if the officer dies, and they're just like, what do we do?
What would happen is either a second in command will take up the position, but it creates a window where they have to, like, everybody has to see that the officer's down, and they have to understand that the next guy in line is in charge. But it creates a window that the Americans could exploit because there was confusion. Like, if American line charged the British line after the officer got shot shot dead, then they wouldn't be able to react very fast because they can't do anything unless they're told to do it.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
That's how war was fought.
So they're basically just like a bunch of sheep. Like they don't know how to think for themselves.
Well, if you're in a line with like 20 people and you have an officer above you and your officer gets taken out, what are you going to do? Because if you do something,
I mean, I assume that the whole goal of the war is to kill the enemy.
but you don't know the tactics for the individual battle, you might be supposed to do
kill
something.
them.
Not entirely. Because if you're in a
Pull the
certain,
musket ball out of the cow, put it in your gun, and shoot them.
so you don't know anything about tactics. That's your problem. Because let's say you're part of a battle plan where you're supposed to hold a defensive position, but your commander gets shot dead, and
Defense. What is this, a basketball game?
well,
I thought we're killing people here.
role isn't just about killing people.
Okay, keep going.
But if you're set up in a defensive position, and your job is to hold that defensive position, and your officer gets taken out, and you and your buddies decide, you know what, let's just charge.
Well,
Then-
your officer. Okay, so your officer would basically be like your boss at work.
yes,
If my boss doesn't show up for work, I still know what to do.
because you're in a position where you do the same thing every day. In a battle, you don't do the same thing every day.
You're killing people.
You're not always. You're not
So, or
always.
some days are you like
You don't.
making peanut butter jelly sandwiches?
When people go to war, the first thing they do is not just charge straight at each other and just go guns blazing.
That's not how they do it.
No. They look at what needs to be. If you're at war, it's not the goal is not to
Is
kill
this?
the
Are
enemy.
you talking about a war now or a war like?
Any war, you're not. The goal is not to kill the enemy. The goal is to cut off their supply line and force them into a position where they have to surrender. Because the ideal war is when the enemy surrenders and you didn't lose any men. You're not killing their entire army, because you can't rule over conquered people
So you
if they're
just
all
want
dead.
to, you just kind of want to just like bleed them out.
You want to make them. You want to destroy their will to go on. You want to make it to where they have to surrender.
I thought one of the goals was like one of the reasons that you didn't want to kill the people was because like you like if I was like say we were on opposite sides and like you were like out in the field lollygagging around, I wouldn't want to kill you because if I just injured you, then somebody else would have to come try to save you, and then I could get that person.
No, you're thinking about like guerrilla tactics and stuff like that.
What do you mean?
Like that's the type of warfare that that's
What do
very
you mean? What do
small
you mean
scale.
guerrilla tactic?
Guerrilla tactics like small scale warfare, like one-on-one scenarios. I'm talking about grand battle plans. Like and you can't think that like that on a grand scale.
Like
that's
how many people are in like a grand battle plan?
Well, that's an entire country. Here's the thing: there's a difference between tactics and strategy. Tactics are small scale warfare. Strategy is large scale warfare. So in like World War II, tactics would be considered what like this Panzer division is going to do to this infantry column, and strategy would be what this main force does against this main force.
So these people never just like net up and just fought it out.
Not really. I mean, it happens, but usually it's not the goal. Like you're not trying to kill every single enemy soldier in the enemy army.
So what's the point?
The point is to capture territory.
That seems boring.
That's just how wars.
Is that how they did it like in the 1800s?
Yeah.
But what did they do when they only had like swords? I mean, they had to meet up and fight it out.
I'm not saying that they didn't meet up and fight it out. I'm saying that the goal wasn't to blindly charge.
Do you know how that stuff worked?
What?
Like whenever all they had was swords.
Yeah.
Was there like was there like a ref? Like was there somebody that was like, all right, we're gonna have war now, and then everyone went at it, and then whenever it was like done, was there somebody that was like, all right, stop, and then everyone went back to their sides?
What do you mean, like how a war is ended?
Yeah,
Well,
because like okay, think if you have like if all they had swords and axes and horses and all and whatever and bows, and they all met up to fight, who's controlling it?
who's control?
Do they just go until somebody's dead? Until one side's dead?
They go until one side retreats, because they're not all gonna die. You don't all. Everyone that shows up to the battlefield, like one side does not get wiped out. It never happens. You never ever ever see one side get completely and totally wiped out. They get their morale broken, and the survivors of the battle retreat with the commander.
So like after a certain amount of time, they just turn around and run.
Well, after something happens. So let's say you're a knight.
So if while they're turning around and running, are you not allowed to shoot them?
you can, but it's dumb because you want to cover as much distance as you can. Oh, I mean, if you're like the attacker, like the victor,
Yeah.
there's nothing stopping you. But what happens is they organize their retreats in such a way that you can't pursue them. Like what would happen? Like let's say you're a medieval army. What would usually happen is the infantry would fight it out, and the infantry would mostly die, and the back lines would retreat, and they'd have their cavalry support the retreat. So like, if you like the two,
So the cavalry is all the guys with the horses.
yeah,
What were their jobs? Like, what did they do?
their jobs were to either cover the retreat or to break the enemy's front line or harass the back line. So let's say you have two.
Harass them?
Yes.
Would they like go make fun of them?
Yeah, they went and spammed them when they blew up their phones.
They went around to the back, and they're like, "Hey, those pants make you look fat."
They started just braiding them on Twitter. Mm-hmm.